This is the VA Disability Master Course, intermediate level. We have a basic, this is an intermediate, and an advanced. Basic is everything a veteran should know, whether you're leaving the service or you've already left the service years ago. That's basic. Intermediate is for two things. One, really maximize your VA disability rating after you've left service, especially if you've been out for over a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20, whatever. And two, for those that want to help other veterans and not charge them in future benefits or flat fee, just genuine help, okay? My opinion, but that's what this course is going to be. Essentially, the end goal is going to be you will be able to take something like this, right? Years of service, deployments, someone who's already service connected for whatever they're service connected for, they have their denials, and then spit out some recommendations. That's the goal of this intermediate course, is to be able to make recommendations to submit those evidence-based claims. Now, this veteran, who shall not be named, we just had our second meeting, and this person was increased. So he was at overall 75%, rounded to 80. He is now at 91, rounded to 90, with a lot of claims in process. And then the big three that he already got the increases for are those, and he has some musculoskeletal tinnitus is in process, HLR for mental health, and then a few deferred. And then the green ones are what I added in here. And so food for thought, if this mental health HLR comes back at 70, this veteran will be 100% P&T. But that's going to be the goal of this intermediate course, okay? Now, I do have a whole slide deck. I'm going to have to pull it up here. Let me pull it up. StreamYard is a bit weird when it comes to slide decks, but here it is. VA Disability Compensation Intermediate. Let me fix my screen here. Boom. All right, now we're rocking. I'll make this as big as I can so you can see. Make sure my head's not in the way. Okay, now we're rocking. We're rolling. VA Disability Compensation Intermediate. There are 5 steps to maximizing VA disability. They are increases, secondaries, denials, new conditions, and presumptives. When it comes to the success rate of VA disability claims consulting companies, although I am not for them, okay, they are successful, and that's a fact. That's objective. We can't argue that. But they're really going to deal in increases in secondaries and, of course, those presumptive conditions. Increases, presumptives are the easy stuff. So are new conditions. Secondaries and denials are really where it gets more difficult. So starting with increases. Increases are the easiest way for any veteran to obtain an overall increase, period. Okay? All you need to do is look at what the veteran is service connected for. Use 38 CFR, ask questions. Hey, veteran, I see you have a 10% rating for your lower back. How's your range of motion? What's your pain like? Can you bend forward over for me real quick? I don't need to see the back end, right? And as they bend forward, you realize they have limited range of motion, and you believe, according to 38 CFR, that should warrant an increase. There you go. That's how you determine if that veteran warrants an increase. Now, I will say this. It's not required, but I always recommend veterans submit that evidence-based increased claim. It's one thing to say you have these mental health symptoms. It's another thing to talk to your primary healthcare team, your referred healthcare team, talk about those symptoms, and then submit that claim. So have the intent to file date there. That's what that's for. Submit that evidence-based increase. Is it required? No, but it's super highly recommended. So here's an increased example. Service connected 66, rounded to 70. This veteran is rated at mental health, left knee, right knee, GERD, and tinnitus. And so what I'm going to do, looking at this basic scenario, I'm looking at mental health immediately, 30%. We know mental health can be rated at 50, 70, and 100. I'm going to be asking that veteran questions about panic attacks, about depressive episodes, about connecting emotionally with their children or their spouse or their family, whatever that picture looks like for them. and just take that self-report. Let the veteran speak. And depending on what the veteran says, we might go for an increase or we may not. If the veteran's like, hey, I feel properly rated at 30%, I really don't have those symptoms, then it is what it is. Same thing with left knee. We're going to be looking at range of motion, saying, hey, how's your knee range of motion? Are you able to do a squat? Are you able to flex and extend your knee all the way straight? Are you able to stand up and not have instability balance? What does that look like for you? Same thing goes for right knee. GERD at 30%, that is a pretty solid rating, especially with the new criteria that is out. And so we would be asking questions about 30 CFR for that, and then as well as for tinnitus. Now, navigating 38 CFR, I know this stuff off the top of my head because I do it all day, every day. But if I did not know, and guess what? There's a whole tutorial on how to do it right there. If I did not know, all you need to do is go to Google, and type in disability 38 CFR ECFR. So if we did mental health, you would type in mental health 38 CFR ECFR, click that ECFR link, and then go to mental health. You can use Control F, however you want to find the rating schedule, and then you will see how the VA rates those symptoms. I'm going to pin a video in the comments talking about how to find those increases, but that is a very short version of that video there if you already don't know how to. And that's it. That's step one. It's the easiest step. That's how most veterans obtain the overall increase. Extremely easy. Now we move on to secondaries, and secondaries are not easy at all, okay? They're generally more difficult to build the Nexus, especially if it can't be proven. So for instance, radiculopathy secondary to lumbar strain, that's easy. You can see it. It can be tested. Pretty easy. The connection is there. What about a 40% lumbar strain causing depression? How do you prove that? And it's very difficult. And how the answer is, one, through evidence indicating the connection is there. Evidence meaning your primary care and your referred healthcare team. And then sometimes you might want to consider that Nexus letter and that DBQ. I personally don't recommend them for that initial claim, even for secondaries. You're really going to see these shine in appeals. But that's how secondaries work. You can't just say, hey, my migraines is caused from my tinnitus. We are not medical professionals at all. But what you can say is, hey, primary care, hey, referred care, when my tinnitus flares up, I really get bad migraines, and here are my symptoms. You let the healthcare team, your referred primary care, build that evidence indicating the secondary is there, the connection is there, submit the claim, and with that evidence, now the C&P examiner hopefully, okay, and that's a whole other topic, hopefully will connect the secondary. In events that they don't, that's when the medical opinion in DBQ really does come in clutch, that I personally recommend at least considering in appeals. But that's it. Now, I do want to show you this secondary list link, and we're going to be clicking on a few links here. So stand by. Let's go ahead and share my screen to this mediocre website. I'm going to click home first. Here's the website, CIVDIVonline.com. You can go to more, templates. This is all the way at the bottom, but there's a personal statement template here, ChatGPT, Nexus letter, cheat sheets, and then boom, the secondary list. Okay. So here's how we're not going to watch it. Don't worry. I'll spare you that. But here we have a Google Doc for a secondary list. It's right there. Okay, there's a video, there's a Google Doc, boom, pull that up, and bada bing, bada boom. Now we're looking at our secondary list. Ankle conditions, ear conditions, foot conditions, hypertension, knees, lumbar, migraines, PTSD, respiratory, shoulders, more respiratory, mid, back, and cervical. I need to change that to cervical. Whoops, that was a mistake. Cervical, neck conditions, wrist, and then there's some notes on secondaries that we already discussed, And then, of course, some affiliate partnerships there, which you don't have to use. And if you have a problem with it, just don't use them. Find your own. That's fine. But that's it. That's how you look at secondaries. And so now what that actually looks like is, let's go back to the PowerPoint now, which is this bad boy over here. We'll hide that. Okay, so going back to our scenario, which the veteran, we've already said, has mental health, GERD, tinnitus, left knee, right knee. What I would do is say, okay, veteran, you have mental health. Talk to me about erectile dysfunction, right? Or on the female side of the house, female sexual arousal disorder. That opens up SMCK. What about sleep apnea? They're already rated for GERD. What about IBS? IBS and GERD are now separated. IBS is closely associated with anxiety. What does that look like? For the knees, now musculoskeletal conditions causing other musculoskeletal conditions. I know everyone talks about it. It is much more difficult to connect than what YouTube portrays it to be. But technically speaking, yes, your knee could cause back issues and hip issues and shin splints, maybe some thigh issues, okay? But then you would look at GERD. Hey, are you on any medications for GERD? What are some conditions that medication could cause? And are you currently diagnosed? Just because someone says, I have migraines, does not mean they've been diagnosed for migraines. So if we're going migraines secondary to tinnitus, get the diagnosis. Also get the evidence indicating the secondary condition exists in the first place. And that's secondaries. That's the second step. Then we move on to denials. And denials is hands down the most difficult step. Okay, you have to before anyone gives advice on denials, I don't care who they are, VA rater, YouTuber so-and-so, Facebook commenter, Redditor, attorney, doesn't matter. Before anyone gives advice on denials, you absolutely must understand the reason they were denied. And there are only 3 reasons. Really, there's 4. There's a hidden 4th one there that is actually a part of number 2. But I wanted to separate it just so you see it visually. The big 3. You were denied because you lack evidence from service, whether medical or evidence other than medical. You were denied because you were not currently diagnosed. And these are and or. It could be one. It could be multiple. If you're not diagnosed, then you know you need to get a diagnosis, okay? And then 3, the nexus. It is pretty rare to see someone that has evidence from service and the current diagnosis, but they're lacking the nexus. What I would do is immediate higher level review, and then that would be a very clear indicator to start considering that nexus letter in DBQ personally. Now, there's a hidden 4th one here that's tacked on to current diagnosis. Not only does it need to be current and chronic, meaning within 1 year, but there's got to be continuity of symptoms. So, for instance, you want to claim migraines from service. You have the in-service event. You have medical evidence from service of the migraines, and you have a diagnosis 25 years later. You're going to have to show some kind of evidence about migraines from then to now. You can do that through statements. You can do that through private records. You can do that through many avenues depending on what the condition is. For instance, mental health. I was helping a veteran. I had them upload their arrest report because they had some domestic violence issues sprinkled throughout about a 25-year time frame. And that is a very clear indication of mental health, specifically on the PTSD side of the house, on the irritability for that. And that is evidence other than medical, right? Medical evidence would be just as strong, but that's evidence. That's an example of evidence other than medical. But you have to understand why the veteran was denied prior to the next step, which is, okay, now we know why the veteran's denied. What's next? And it's either going to be, a higher level review, a supplemental, or the Board of Veteran Appeals. That one I'm not too much of a fan on, but sometimes it's needed. And sometimes people prefer just to go straight to the board, which is totally okay. Just not my recommendation. If the veteran had all the evidence and they submitted all the evidence meaning the big 3, Whatever you think evidence is totally irrelevant, okay? Evidence is only the big three: the in-service event, the current diagnosis, and the nexus. If the veteran believes that they have the required evidence, then do a higher level review. It's got to be within 1 year, okay? And I'm going to add that on here, within 1 year. Now, if the veteran is denied and they have new and relevant evidence, they can go ahead and submit that submittal. That is both within 1 year and after 1 year, 1 year and after. Now, for instance, let's go back to the reasons for denial. Let's say the veteran didn't have a current diagnosis. They get the diagnosis, bada bing, bada boom. That would be a supplemental claim. And I'm going to be real with you. Higher level reviews for service connection are far and few between, meaning they're very uncommon. You really see HLRs come in clutch for ratings that were lowballed. For instance, migraines at 0%, that should have been 30 or 50%. That's where HLRs really do come in clutch. Yes, still see them for service connection. I'm just saying it's uncommon. Supplemental claims are the opposite. Well, you'll really see supplemental claims come in clutch for service connection, not so much for the rating given. But regardless, that is higher level reviews and supplemental claims. And then we have the Board of Veteran Appeals. I highly, highly, highly recommend getting an accredited attorney if you're considering the Board of Veteran Appeals. I cannot push that enough. I have no partnership with Andy Grosslaw, AP Grosslaw, but that's who I would recommend. He's a good stand-up dude. Again, no partnership. I would like one. Okay, so if you go to Andy, let him know I sent you, and maybe we can start building that. But right now we don't have any. He's just a good stand-up dude. Seriously, I mean that. That's the board. Okay. Now with the board and the higher level review, you can do you have some options. For instance, with HLR, you can do an informal conference, which is the VA just gives you a call on your phone. It does delay the process a bit, which sucks, but that's the option I always recommend. Or you can just submit a personal statement with that HLR, and that would be your voice to the reviewer. Or you can just do the HLR and let the VA be the VA, and I really don't recommend that option at all. At least submit a personal statement 4138 with that. Same thing with the board. You can request a hearing. You can request the review. But again, at the board, I would just really rely on that accredited attorney and their recommendations, because they're going to be able to see the ins and outs of your claim that no one else, to include myself, can see. But that's denials. The next two are easy steps: new conditions and presumptives. Now, with new conditions, you'd be surprised at how many veterans, when they transition from military to civilian, one, don't claim anything at all. Two, miss some things. I missed migraines personally. Migraines was very clear in my service treatment records, and I did not submit migraines when I got out. I didn't know that, okay? I had no idea, and that's just what new conditions are, saying, hey, you have these conditions in your service treatment records. I would personally start in the exit exam or the separation health assessment. It's called many, many, many things, final physical, whatever it's called. That's a good place for medical evidence. And then comparing that final physical, the exit exam, the separation health assessment, with your entrance exam at MEPS. Boom. Everyone has medical evidence. Entrance exam compared with your exit exam, that's medical evidence. You can compare and contrast the two. And that's pretty much new conditions, right? Now, you still need to be currently diagnosed. Just because you had a migraine complaint 20 years ago in service does not mean you can submit the claim. Go ahead and do the intent to file, reserve that effective date, but get that current diagnosis for any and every claim. That's my recommendation always. But that's new conditions, super easy. Then we have presumptive conditions, which is the easiest step of all of this. Largely, this is going to fall into the PACT Act, so those Gulf War, post 9/11 veterans. That does not discount or invalidate the Vietnam, Korea era, prisoners of war, the atomic veterans, or the TERA. TERA is not presumptive. It still requires an opinion due to the condition connected to the exposure. FYI, that's a whole other video topic. But that's presumptive, okay? So for instance, if a veteran is a Gulf War post 9/11 veteran and they have a diagnosis of sinusitis, rhinitis, asthma, IBS, any of the other cancers or illnesses under the PACT Act, submit the claim. You need the current diagnosis, okay? You need the current diagnosis. You need the current diagnosis, but the PACT Act relieves the burden from the veteran, and the Nexus, which is still required, is presumptive in nature, not medical in nature. Now, there is a full presumptive list there that you can click, and it is a PDF doc from the VA that shows you the full presumptive list to include MUC-MIs, which include like chronic fatigue, IBS, migraines, headaches, things of that nature. Okay, but yes, those can be presumptive. Migraines can be presumptive. Can be. Not that they always are. And that's it. That's the class. I have a scenario here, and I'm going to tell you what I would do. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to think on your own. You can pause the video. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. What you can do is pause the video when you see the scenario, work through that, and then compare your answers with mine. You know, we can go back and forth in the comment section if that's what you want to do. But here we go. We have a scenario. Okay. Years of service. 08 to 2012. This person was in the Marine Corps. 0311, which is infantry. Deployments, OIF and OEF. So they definitely rate the PACT Act. They're currently service connected at 64%, rounded to 60. Mental health at 50, lumbar strain at 10, left wrist strain at 10, IBS at 10. Denials for GERD. They're missing the service treatment record, so the in-service event and the current diagnosis. And flat feet, they are missing the current diagnosis. So go ahead, hit pause. I'm going to wait 10 seconds for you to hit pause, do all that stuff. And then I'm going to give you what I would do. And I'm just going to talk about it here in the discussion. But I'll give you 10 seconds. Oh, buddy, old pal. Okay. So assuming that's 10 seconds, I don't really know. But here's what I would do. First, starting with increases, I'm looking at mental health at 70% and 100. 100's not that common, but I'm still going to ask questions. I'm looking at the increases for mental health, focusing on those 70% symptoms, okay? Like the ability to maintain effective relationships and connect emotionally with their children or their spouse, irritability, the frequency of panic attacks, frequency of depressive episodes, suicidal ideations, those are really what I'm going to focus in on from going from mental health 50 to 70. Lumbar strain is the range of motion. I'll say, hey, veteran A, you know, what's your range of motion look like? Can you touch your toes? Can you touch your knees? When do you start to feel pain? Can you extend? What about side to side? What about rotation? And if looking at the 30 CFR criteria for lumbar strain, I would then say, hey, you know what? I think you should go talk to your primary healthcare team. Same thing with mental health. Go talk to your primary referred healthcare team about your back and your mental health, and let's go ahead and prepare the increase. Now, left wrist, largely rated at 0 or 10%. That's a solid rating for a wrist, unless the veteran has some crazy stuff going on, like the loss of use ankylosis. I would probably leave that alone. Right now, if they rated the increase, obviously we would go that route. And then IBS. IBS is rated now after May 19th of 2024. IBS is rated at 10, 20, 30%. I would look at the criteria for 20 and 30%. Ask the veteran questions of, hey, can you tell me the relationship between your diarrhea and your constipation? What does that look like? What about abdominal pain and abdominal cramps? What does that look like for you? And depending on their answers, we may do an increase. Doesn't mean that we have to increase all of these. You know, the veteran could be properly rated for mental health. The veteran's back could be fine and has range of motion, but with pain. But the veteran could also say, hey, I have abdominal pain. I have abdominal cramps. You know, I'm stopped up and I go 2-3 days without using the restroom. And then the floodgates will let loose. And I'll just kind of leave that there before I go into detail. But then after that, we'll say, you know what? Let's do an increase for that IBS. And that's increases. Then we look at secondaries. Coming off of secondaries, now we see the denial for GERD. We already see rated for IBS. So we'll take out the GI tract for mental health. But we're going to ask about erectile dysfunction. And for females, a female sexual arousal disorder, there might be hypertension. Maybe bruxism is a part of that. That would technically be roped under mental health, but that could help the increase from 50 to 70. There are tons of secondaries for mental health that we would use a secondary list for and say, hey, talk to me about sleep apnea. Do you snore at night? Have you been diagnosed? What is that story between you and sleep apnea? And then once we figure out, if the veteran says, hey, I've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, we see that they've been exposed to heavy particulates. Okay, they might be overweight. If that's the case, we're going to have to address that and try and get that, quote unquote, recognized by the VBA. But we're going to build the case for correlating factors, saying sleep apnea is connected to mental health. That's how that conversation would go. Lumbar strain, immediately, anytime someone is rated for the lower spine, we are absolutely looking at the sciatic nerve, radiculopathy. There's different types of nerve damage. Radiculopathy is going to be the most common in each leg. That's 2 different claims, 2 different secondaries with bilateral factor. We're also going to look at the rest of the spine. Hey, how severe is your lumbar strain? It's only at 10%, but if they rated the increase, maybe we talk about the bladder conditions. Lower spine conditions can often cause bladder conditions like urinary infrequency. Left wrist strain, although 10% is a solid rating, let's talk about nerve damage in the hand, right? Something happened in the wrist where you have a 10%, which is limited range of motion. What's carpal tunnel like? Do your hands and fingers get numb? What about your elbow and your forearm, right? Or your shoulder? Any of those can be secondary. And then IBS, depending on the medication used or other secondaries that would probably be roped better under mental health anyways, we would go that route. And that's secondaries. Those are questions that I would ask this veteran. Looking at the denials, we have to understand why the veteran was denied. I went ahead and put that here for training purposes. But if the veteran claimed GERD and they're missing medical evidence or evidence from service and they're missing the diagnosis, first I would say, hey, before we even talk about GERD, you need to go get diagnosed. Okay. And I would leave it at that because they're missing their service treatment records. They're missing the diagnosis. Maybe they claim GERD because someone on YouTube told them to. We don't know the whole story, right? But missing both of those, evidence from service and the current diagnosis, absolutely go get diagnosed, and then we will revisit that specifically. Now, flat feet, they do have the in-service events. They're missing the diagnosis. This one's easy, okay? Assuming they didn't have flat feet on their interest exam, then it becomes an aggravation claim. But if they're missing the diagnosis, hey, go get diagnosed. And guess what? If you go to your podiatrist or your primary care and you can't get diagnosed, then you probably don't have flat feet. Okay. Now, if you do, and they're being a little weird about it, at the VA, they deal in treatment codes. That would be good enough to suffice for new and relevant evidence for that supplemental claim. But as I see these are both supplemental claims, in my opinion, assuming the veteran, has a route to GERD. Now, then we would look at new conditions. I would ask the veteran, hey, is there anything from service you complained about that you don't see listed here? Completely rely on their testimony to drive that discussion. Should be fairly quick. And then last but certainly not least, is presumptive conditions, especially for OIF and OEF, which is PACT Act. I'm looking at sinusitis, rhinitis, asthma. They already have IBS, check mark there, maybe COPD. There are tons of other conditions. Those are just the most common. And if the veteran says, hey, I've never been diagnosed with sinusitis or rhinitis, but, I do have discharge in my nose. I get migraines from my discharge, whatever the veteran reports through their testimony, then you say, hey, go get diagnosed. Go talk to your primary care about rhinitis and sinusitis. Go get that CT scan. Once they do that, submit the claim. Okay. And that's it. That is how veterans and companies maximize their VA disability ratings. It's through the 5 steps. Increases is going to be the easiest. Well, increases and presumptives are the easiest. There's new conditions that are also easy. Then you have secondaries, which aren't so easy. Then you have denials, which are the most difficult, especially if the veteran is lacking the in-service event. But let me know down below. I am going to start doing actual courses, and I'm going to do these live so that way people can ask questions and for me to clarify. Maybe you want to ask a question on your specific situation. We can do that live if you are interested in that. And I'm serious about this. If you're interested in that, go ahead and comment below that you're interested, because before I go waste some time, I want to make sure that we have a full class. And I think I would do like 20 people at once. And so once we have that, we can go ahead and get that rolling. Comment below what you think about the course and if you would take this live so you're able to ask questions. And I would definitely go more in depth and actually show you what these look like with multiple scenarios. If you would like that, let me know.